This episode of Authentic Lives is in English. Enjoy!
I was working with people who didn't want to just start a school. They wanted to live in a world where all life thrives. And we were using a school and education as a leverage point to do that.
Hello and welcome back to Authentic Lives. We're back in this really special episode. Thank you for coming back for our second season. Authentic Lives is a podcast in which we talk about the intentionality of living authentic experiences. I am Stael Campos, and looking for experiences like this, today I drink a black currant tea with Jenny Finn. Jenny has designed a structure that fosters vitality in people, communities, and organizations for nearly 30 years. She holds a PhD in sustainability education and co-founded Springhouse, a school inspired by a vision to live in a world where all life thrives. Dr. Finn's research, mentoring, and teaching invites people to deepen the relationship they have with themselves in order to serve the world with greater clarity and compassion. Dr. Finn articulated Source Design, 5 principles that take care of life in a person, community, and place. These principles are practiced at Springhouse and shared globally with those who share the vision of a thriving world. Jenny, thanks so much for accepting this invitation. I'd like to invite you to share a little bit about this tea and your grandma's teacup and to share your stories. What makes you, you?
Gosh, that's a lot of stories, Stell. So we'll start with the tea and the teacups, and then feel free to help me sort through because there's so many.
Yes.
So I'm showing Stell right now my little tea area in my office. On the top shelf is a silver teapot that was actually a teapot that my parents got when they got married in 1969. And then I have all these little teacups that most of these are from my granny, Rosemary, who died a long time ago when I was 16. I'm 53 now. And there's one big cup there because sometimes I like a big cup of tea, and that's actually made by a beautiful artist who's now moved away from Floyd, but her name's Isla Mullen. And she makes these beautiful, this is a teacup that has red poppies on it. It's lovely. And then I have mason jars of different kinds of tea. I have a hibiscus tea. It looks like an oat straw tea, a rose hip, a spice tea, raspberry leaf, and then there's my black currant. And so I have I even have an electric teapot in my office. I mean, I'm serious about this. So, and this, then I'm drinking out of one of my granny's teacups, and I'm drinking out of a teapot. It's really beautiful. It's like a clay teapot with flowers on it. It's all terracotta colored, and that's from my friend Ellie, and who I haven't seen in a long time. So it's really nice to pull out this teapot and remember Ellie, and my love for her. So drinking tea is a regular part of anyone who comes in my office. There's usually tea. There's always pretty much tea in the kettle.
But I think the most amazing part that every little thing reminds you of someone, something beautiful with love. It's a gift or it's a beautiful memory since your childhood and your family. And this, I think, is the most beautiful thing. So I think, Jenny, you have done many, many things. Maybe you can contextualize a little bit about your life, how you came to this point where you are in Springhouse. I think you can tell us a little bit about Source Design as well. But how did you get to create all those beautiful things that you are doing now?
Thank you. Yes. So anyone who's listening, Stael, we'll put a link in there to the book that I just wrote that is was produced, handmade by our community. So there's only right now, we've made maybe 500 copies of it, have sold maybe more than half of those. So we're not mass producing the book that I wrote. It's very small. It's 50 pages, less than 50 pages, and beautifully handmade and illustrated. It is a little piece of magic that so many people have had their hands on. And I'm sharing that because my story is in there. My story is in there, and so is Springhouse's story, and then all of the principles. And it was really important for me to write that in a way at this time in my life where it's been really 30 years of doing this work of designing culture,
Can you tell us the name of the book?
Thriving. Yes, it's called Consider the Source. And I'll say more about that. Consider the Source, a design for living. And it's beautiful. And there's probably, of the second edition, I think maybe there's a little less probably now than 200 copies left. And then we're going to print a much easier to print form of it, because I cannot explain to you how much it takes to letterpress and screen print and hand make a book. It is,
I can imagine,
unbelievable, but it is so, I mean, I'll show you. You can't see it again if you're listening, but I will show you. Stael, this book is just pretty precious. So this is the little book, and then this is the pages, but there's these beautiful illustrations that were done by my colleague and dear friend, Sarah. She's a Springhouse staff member, but I'm showing Stael these beautiful pictures of they're almost
Can I share you the story of my copy of this? I had one.
Do you have a copy? Okay,
not
great.
anymore.
Tell me, please.
But
what happened?
Yes, so I need more copies actually. So for me, this
Order
is
them
so
soon.
amazing book. Yeah, I think I'll go there and get personally. I think it'd be easier. So when I ordered, I was still in Brazil. So I ordered to my sister's house, and then I traveled to England. And then I told her, I ordered the book. It might arrive soon, and then you keep it for me, and I get it when it's possible. And then I received an email from Sarah. She was asking what I thought about the book, and I said, "Oh, it didn't arrive yet." And she said, "Oh, let's see where it is, and then we'll track, because it went from Floyd, Virginia, in America, to Jundiaí, São Paulo, in Brazil." And
oh my goodness!
And it was lost in the way, so we lost this first copy.
Oh, and then, wow!
Yeah, and then I asked Sarah, "So yeah, what should I do?" And she asked, "Should I send another one to the same address?" I was already in England, and I said, "Yes, please send to the same address. My sister will get it." I thought it was safer because I didn't know exactly what would happen to England. And then my sister got it, and she brought it to me in England. So I got to read the book.
Oh my gosh.
And for me, it was so good that I gave to a friend that is going to a process, but I'm meeting so many people who really deserve this book as a gift. And I think I should have a couple of copies with me wherever I go. Hey, I have a brief interruption to the episode with an amazing update about this book. I went to Springhouse in February, and this first copy that had never arrived just got back to the sender in the last day that I was there. So I could get one of the first prints of the book. And even better, I could get it signed by all the staff and the students that were present there that day. It was so impressive, so amazing, the gift that life gives to us. And now, let's go back to the episode. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about it, why it's so beautiful, why it inspired me, because it all comes from you.
Thank you for getting a copy of the book. That's really sweet. So when I'm 53 now, when I was about 19, I was living in Michigan, and I was going to college. I was raised in a Irish Catholic family in a Jewish neighborhood outside of Detroit, Michigan. And by the time I got into my teenage years, I was having some problems. I didn't have the support I needed to stay connected to myself, to know myself better. I was pretty, the school system was pretty conventional. It was a college prep school that, I guess that's not conventional, but it was conventional in its design. It was designed for the way that most schools are still designed. And it doesn't really include getting close to yourself and your own power and knowing who you are and your own identity, which is severely problematic. So by the time I graduated from high school, I had great grades and everything, but I was pretty lost. I did not know who I was. And the norm really where I was, and I think it's kind of getting worse maybe, but was to cope. I used a lot of substances, not a lot, but mostly alcohol, drank a lot, was a big partier, and I was getting ready to go to college. And that was one of my primary coping methods was to drink. And also to be really oriented around my boyfriend at the time, which I still see even into adulthood, people really orienting around ways to just distract themselves from themselves, but also to stay safe. That was my way of staying safe, was to numb out and then also hold on to one person for my security. So by the time I got to college, I was very, very lost, and I drank even more. Again, it was kind of the norm. So like when my friends reflect back, on occasion, I'll talk to a high school friend here and there, not often, but sometimes, and they'll be like, oh, that was, I didn't notice anything out of the norm that you were doing, which again is problematic, but that was just the case, was that was kind of the norm. And by the time I got to 20 years old, you wouldn't be able to tell really, but I was really a mess. Did not know who I was, still oriented around that same person, that same boyfriend, severely, I would say, and was drinking a lot. And so I happened to be, when I was 20 in May, I guess that would have been 1990. I was at a fraternity party at a college. Maybe some people can relate who are listening. And I was very drunk. And the person that I was pretty obsessed with came into the party with someone else. And I had a thought to myself that if I had a weapon or something, that I would hurt him badly, if not kill him. And something happened right after that, where I had that thought, and it was almost like something inside of me went like kind of shook up. And the next thing I heard from within myself was, put your drinks down, you will never drink again. And it was within me, but it wasn't like I heard it from booming from the clouds, but it was definitely, I did not know what was happening. And what's even stranger is I listened. It was a mystical experience that I had at the age of 20 that showed me there is something greater than myself that I'll never understand, but that I can trust and follow. I didn't know that at the time. But I put my drinks down. I walked down Grand River Avenue, and I've never had a drink since that day. And I entered a road of recovery. And when I say that, I mean, I was recovering a relationship with myself and with the life that moves through me. So I very quickly realized that in my early 20s that I was not going to be able to live in a new way, in more of a thriving kind of a way, if I did not have support. Now, I didn't know any of this then. This is more of my research now as an adult, looking back to my own personal experience first, and then to all of the people I've mentored, including organizations, over the past 3 decades. So, what's needed when we decide to change, like the first principle of source design, the 5 design principles were born at Springhouse in 2018. after, I guess that's 5 years of practice here as a collective. So before I say what those are, I'll say that they're personal and they're not theoretical in terms of we came up with them in a closet and are now practicing them. They are very much grounded in practice, my own personal practice and collective practice. But I will just say that after I woke up from addiction of many kinds and was guided in a new way by a great mystery, very shortly after that, I was diagnosed with a very serious cancer at the age of 25. So I faced my own death and went through a whole bunch of things and got even closer to that mysterious voice that is the most important thing to me in my life. That is what my entire life is devoted to. And that I hope everything I do is a testament of gratitude to something I'll never be able to explain, but that I know for sure is there. And if we design in ways that allow that magic and power of life to come through, it will. And it's not about knowing what it is first to design for it. It's really about just choosing one day at a time to orient around something greater than our dysfunction and our limitations, while also honoring our limitations.
I think this is quite beautiful that out from really, I'll say, traumatic experience, a lot of suffering first, your addictions, like alcohol and the person, and also a disease. And you got to change this view by this, I will also call the great mystery. I thought this was a beautiful way to call it. Mm-hmm. It helped you to see there is another way to live, another things that are there, and that you could use this to create a new life path for you, and in a young age at 25.
Yes, it's a powerful thing. And it's the power of life itself. We have many names and stories to talk about that mystery and point toward it. And for me, the very essence of it is the transformative power of life, that if we allow it, it will change us. Like a tree. I mean, we're just like trees in that way, except for consciousness that we can choose to really not align with that power. It doesn't mean that power isn't there, but we can really stifle its work in our lives. So after I had cancer, then that wake-up call became a call to service very quickly for me. And it's not about helping people. It's not for me. It's the beautiful quote from the Aboriginal activist Lilla Watson, who says, if you've come to help me, you're wasting your time. But if you've come because your liberation is bound up with mine, then let us work together. We are in this together. No one is free if there is anyone who's oppressed. So we are not free, but we can continue to orient around freedom. So after waking up, I quickly, I really kind of moved into like pursuing some education and things around how I was going to serve a world that was in trouble. And the one that I could never save, but one that I could really interface with in a way that I think, unfortunately, it was different because I had surrendered, and I do every day, to a power greater than myself to work with. So I knew that I had something unique to bring, and then I just found communities, mentorship, and practices and regular places of practice to hone those skills and to be able to share them. So I was thinking about this the other day. There are so many societal systems that I have worked within to affect change. I mean, from education, theological institutions, the prison system, mental health system, medical healthcare system, community grassroots organizing, like just there are so many places that I've been interfacing with over so many years that I was bringing basically what I'm telling you now to these places. Places would contact me and say, we're really in need of, they wouldn't say it like this, but vitality. We're running low on our vitality meter. And would you come in and do something? And so I would always bring in something creative, dance, art, visual art, ritual, something courageous conversations, always returning us to our bodies through breath. But the thing is, Stael, is that when you bring that into a place that a person's life, even, or an organization that doesn't have a design to support the spark, it goes away very quickly. It's kind of like a wood stove fire. If I leave it, it goes out. The beautiful thing about the soul is that, one of my teachers said, the soul is the fire that takes no wood. It's always burning, but boy, can it run low. I'm sure people can relate to that. And it requires
many people.
Right. And so we have to design, or we don't have to, we can choose to design our lives and our communities and our organizations around, we can center the power of life. And that is the primary focal point that we're designing around. Unfortunately, that is really not the case globally. We're much more oriented around, we've mistaken some things as the greatest power, like money, and power without roots and love. We've oriented around something much more patho-adolescent and egoic to center around consciously and unconsciously, that it's killing us as people and as a planet. It's up to us to choose to design a different way. As vulnerable as that is.
How should we change this center and to put life in the center? What would be the changes that we need to make? Like, we can talk about here, like in person level, in organization level, how you do it. How did you change this in a design way?
Yeah, I have. By the grace of something greater than myself and the courage of a community, we are doing that right now. And basically what happened for me is when I let go of all of that going into organizations and things, it was great practice. I traveled all over the world and all over the United States, speaking, teaching, doing that. And then I let it go. And I let it go. And my conversation with the mystery was, I want to see in my lifetime what would happen if in place over time, we took care of the spark of life as a community. I don't know how that's going to be done. I was finishing my PhD in education. I have a master's in social work, worked in mental health, had my license, blah, blah, blah. I had no idea how I was going to do that, but I really wasn't interested in working within the system at this point. It was more, how are we going to design in place over time, centering the source and power of life? I did not have any answers, but that was the question that I traveled from the Rocky Mountains in Colorado, where I'd been for 20 years plus, to the Blue Ridge Mountains, where I am now, which are much older mountains in the United States. They're some of the oldest mountains in the world. And the river here, I believe, is the second or maybe the second oldest river in the world, which is unbelievable, in the New River. So it makes sense that I was pulled here to this place. And I was pulled here with my family in a really weird way. That's a story for another day. But I came here and I wandered around for about 6 months and just wandered the country roads and said, what am I supposed to do? That's my intention. It's the same question you just asked me, is how is this going to be possible? Mm-hmm. In a long story short, I was pulled into an effort of a school that was crumbling here. It wasn't doing well. It just wasn't doing well. It ended up that I and these two other people in a community came in and said, we're going to stick with this. We want to design something that changes culture. It's a school that changes culture. How are we going to do that? Well, the entire design, even the purpose of what school and education is, had to change. Now, when we first started, it really wasn't anywhere where it is now, Springhouse. But I was working with people who didn't want to just start a school. They wanted to live in a world where all life thrives. And we were using a school and education as a leverage point to do that, which makes perfect sense because the school is in place over time. We
keep was the media, to create this environment.
And great. Constant. I mean, God, remember in our younger days, like we spent many of us, more time at school than we did anywhere else. So it's a great place to take back, to apprehend that design and say, we're going to do it differently. Now, to say that is one thing. To do it is incredibly vulnerable. And there's so much distraction and so much pressure and resistance. And we want to keep preserving what doesn't work in these systems because many of us haven't been skilled at how to be with change. I understand it's not easy, especially if you don't have a center within yourself. Change is traumatic because you're constantly you're trying to hold on to something outside of yourself until you're not anymore.
Yeah. And also you don't know, you are trying to do something that you are not sure how it would work because you come from a system that does the things that doesn't work. And then how can you change for something that you didn't experience yet?
Yes, you can't. And in fact, with this design, any adults we work with now, if you don't have a relationship in your own way, autonomous, creative, beautiful way with something greater than yourself, it's not going to work. So let me say something about that. So here's the principle. We call it source design because the source of life is at the center of it. We now have a staff of 8 people here. We've been around for 10 years. Springhouse is much more than a school. It's a cultural experiment. It's named Springhouse because if you go through this area that's called rural Appalachia, you'll see a lot of spring houses, and a spring house is there built to protect the water coming up, that's springing up from the underground. You don't know where it's coming from, how it's happening, but it's coming up. You're going to protect it with a house so that then you can make it useful. People used to use spring houses as a refrigerator, as a place to store their cold things, but also as a place where they could give fresh water away to other people. So this spring house is really to do that with people. Any person who comes into this place is a beloved, incredible child of the universe, really. And so the source within them, there'll never be anything like it again. So to protect it and invite its usefulness is critical. We need more places that are spring houses that protect and invite forth the source within every person, because then your community really is the strongest currency you have when you're doing that, because you have so many facets of life showing themselves when they're allowed to and when they're supported in cultivating. So when I woke up to the power of life, what my life looked like before that was drinking, doing all kinds of things, following my boyfriend around, trying to find security in all these ways that didn't work. As I changed, moving from a really unsustainable way of living in my teenage years to something different in my young adult years, there is no way I could have sustained that change. It's very vulnerable to change. I think we all know this. It requires a spring house around it. And what are the walls of the spring house is the first principle. The first principle of source design is to take care of vulnerability, because it's so vulnerable when you make a change as an organization, a community, or a person, that if you don't take care of that change that moves toward cultivating vitality, it won't last. No way. Not with our personal strategies of survival and a dominant culture in survival mode. There's no way it will sustain. Even if you're doing the things I'm about to say, it's still really hard to maintain and lonely, honestly, a different way of being in a dominant culture that unfortunately is not oriented toward thriving as a whole. Certainly there's a bunch of little spring houses all over the world trying to take care of life. But as a dominant culture, there's a narrative that is really an economic one that is taking over in a way that's not allowing us to thrive. So we take care of vulnerability. That's the first principle, by having a community, mentorship, regular practices that are new and life-giving, and a regular place of practice over time. So for me, that's been many things, but right when I first woke up was really programs that helped me to not only not drink, but find something more sustainable than drinking. They were recovery programs and communities with mentorship that allowed me to learn a new way of life. A community needs the same thing when it's learning and growing. So that's our first principle, is to take care of vulnerability. And if you do that for a while, then the second principle is to cultivate personhood. Cultivating, I think most of us know, is really to like turn over, to till the ground. The word person, at the heart of the word person, is the root of it means to sound through, which I think is so beautiful. It's like, how do we cultivate our personhood in body, in sacredness? How do we do that day after day? Like, how do we maintain a practice? A community will really help with this. If your community's culture is to have regular practices that take care of the body, that foster a sense of the sacred. If you're plopped in there day after day, which we are here at Springhouse, then if you're here for 5 years or more, you are enculturated in a way of taking care of your body and your soul in a place where individuality is respected and unity is fostered. And that's the third principle, to build beloved community. Well, there's also a part of cultivating personhood, which is to grow self-awareness. So our staff, I mean, we have a very comprehensive staff development program here at Springhouse, which includes a pretty relentless commitment to fostering, and a joyful one, our sense of self. Because if we're not doing that as adults, then we have no business teaching that to young people. And they know that. They see us living that, not perfectly, but committed to that. So if we're going to build beloved community, which is the third principle, we have to respect individuality of each member and foster unity for it to be interdependent and not codependent or frankly just strange. A community is much stronger when it's diverse and when its members are rooted in a deep sense of themselves and they have something to hold their hands around. And that's definitely what we're striving for and work toward. And then to take care of relationship. You have to learn. So if you wake up and you take care of the vulnerability of your own change, and then you cultivate it over time, you might just lift your head and be able to look around and see that there are other people who are not thriving. And you can be of service to that, not to save it, but you can create places where people could wake up just like I did. So building beloved community can happen when I have enough inside of me to be able to give it, it's not like it stops. I stop cultivating personhood. I continue that the rest of my life. But there comes a time where I can remember where I lifted my head and I could see around me that there is need around me and that I can do something. I can bring something that fills and heals me while also filling and healing the world. That's the liberation that Lilla Watson is talking about. It's not helping. It's not a power imbalance. We're in this together, and my work heals me probably most of all. So building beloved community, we have to take care of relationships as well. We have to respect individuality, foster unity, and then take care of the relationships within the community for it to be healthy.
Can I just make a comment here? Because I think this is really important. I've been in this part of my life experiencing some communities, which I feel the ones that I've been lucky to be in has this feeling of foster unity and embrace diversity. But if we think about, I'll say regular people life that goes to a job and have their daily routine, community can be your colleagues in work. It can be people in school, people in university. And usually what I feel is that is missing is this sense of unity, is just a bunch of people sharing time, spending time together in the same space. But there is no sense of unity, and then it becomes something like a Frankenstein, something all put together and everyone trying to go somewhere else, and then you feel disconnected.
Yeah.
At least, you know. So this is quite important, and to choose wisely the places where you are if you were not able to create a community that makes sense to you. But this could be your friends, you know, a group of friends.
Yeah. Yeah. Your family, you know, it's how do we, what's our shared purpose together here as a family? And how are we honoring? I mean, one of the ways that we honor individuality is through mentoring. So really celebrate and rites of passage, really celebrating and seeing people individually. We do that all the way from staff to adult participants in our programs to teens. So then if you do that for a while, you will start to create, it's like you have these individual fountains that come together, and it's like one big fountain. And when that fountain grows or that light grows, it attracts attention of people who are thirsty or hungry for more life in a dominant culture where that is not the norm. And they will come toward you. You know, for a while, we didn't really have anything to offer other than our inspiration, where people would come and they'd be like, oh my God, what is happening here? I'm singing, I'm dancing, I'm studying things that I normally wouldn't study, and I'm sharing meals together. And we felt that it was important to have something to give to those people beyond our inspiration. So we started with the design, and that's when we articulated source design. And now we have all kinds of programs for adults to participate in: book studies, network practice, 8-month program, all kinds of stuff. But that's creating culture. When we as a community are strong enough to now start to support others in other places, to do not replicate, but to use these principles to create the conditions for thriving, whether that's a school or a restaurant, it doesn't matter, that people are using these principles to create something new, and that we can support them and hold hands with them. The fourth principle is learning from the earth. And we can learn a lot from the earth, but we can learn a lot from the earth about building culture. That's what this fourth principle is about, is the earth will show us how to build an example, to create a form that is thriving, to sustain that form, and then to support its spread. Think of a tree growing, dropping its apples. It's the same thing. Springhouse was small, and then it grew, and then it started dropping fruit, and we were like, oh my God, we're dropping fruit. People are eating our apples and they're nourished by them. What do we do? Wait, oh my God. Well, what we did was we took a year and looked at, who are we? What are we doing? And that's where source design came from teens and adults and people coming together who love Springhouse to articulate what it is we're doing in a way that's universal and scalable and allows it to grow. So if you do that for a while, then the fifth principle is, and I find this now more than ever, is to love and serve others, like ongoing love and serve others. But you cannot do that if you are not cultivating your own personhood in a beloved community where you're consistently filling up, because this world is in survival mode. So if you're not doing that, none of us are strong enough to just outwit a culture in survival mode. I'm not strong enough to outwit myself when I'm in a place of survival. So we have to, there's a lot of practices that connect me to myself, my community, to love me and remind me and tell me the truth. All of that helps me to love and serve others continuously. And so parts of how we do that are to accept the reality that we're in. Accepting reality doesn't mean condoning it. It means accepting where we are. I cannot do that without being filled up by the power of life. There is no way I can be with this reality unless I have some larger force within me to help me do that. It's way too painful. It's beautiful, but there is way too much suffering that I will never understand. And I need something greater than myself to help me stand with it and face it and be in it while we're building something new. And if we do that, another part of loving and serving others is to really follow a call. Following your call is different than a job. Every person here on the staff at Springhouse is following a call. We've had no staff turnover. When I die, we already have someone who's going to step in my place. We talk about this stuff. We're serious. This is long-term generational work that we intend on doing for a very long time. So we plan for that because we know that's what it's going to take. So that's a calling. That's not a job. That's a calling that you're willing to do anything for. You are willing to commit to that. That is so rare. I mean, I see that pretty much in monks that I've studied with. It's just rare. Commitment for most adults that I've mentored thousands of adults over 30 years to commit in a place over time to build something and to commit to oneself is incredibly rare. And then if we do that, the last part is to keep going. Keep going. Again, very rare. Many of us quit because it is too hard. I'm mentoring someone right now who's like starting something, and they said to me, oh my God, what if nobody comes to this thing? I'm like, nobody probably will come to your thing. Maybe for months, but are you still going to do it? See, that's a call. That's a calling. And most of us just, it's too hard on the ego. I mean, the ego, it's brutal. I can't tell you how many things I've offered for a long time and nobody came. You have to be willing to find your center somewhere deeper within you and to keep going for something to grow. So that's really, source design is really, it's not really about starting a school. I mean, a school is one societal system that you can start new, but it can be anything. We also have an educational approach that's comprehensive for people who are starting schools. What do we need to learn to be a builder of culture? That's the point of our educational approach. But this is really for people who are like, God, I want to start with myself. I want to let it begin with me, and I want to build something needed at this time.
This sense of purpose, this calling thing, probably is rare, but another challenge is to define this in words. You know, even when you feel you have to do something, you have no idea exactly what. It's difficult to formulate your question. And after you have a question, and then what to do, you know, it's a long process to get to this point of doing something and then to commit to it and don't give up and understand and be able to separate the calling, the purpose from the ego, because we are still humans. And a huge part is ego. And then when we can really reach to this level of separating the I part and go to love and serve others, you know, you just feel the sense that you are only one person and that's only one, and you have all the other beings that are in needed of something. And if you can put your strength, put your love to it, it's really, really beautiful. But really, really difficult to get to this point. And then I think all the principles make a lot of sense. And thank you. For me, this was a class. Like I had just a private class with you, Jane.
Well, and I'll just say, it is hard because we live in a dominant culture that doesn't support overall what we're saying. But this starts with building a relationship with the source of your life. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, lay in your bed at night and put your hand on your chest and feel the rise and fall of your chest. Feel your heartbeat. You are being breathed. You are being drummed and breathed by something you'll never understand. And you don't have to. You don't have to. But by God, build a relationship with it. However that looks to you, build a relationship with what breathes you, because it will change you and it will change what is happening in the world one day at a time. We cannot control outcomes, but we do have the agency right now to return to something deeper and learn the skills to be with wholly who we are, including the difficult part, the places we don't like, all of ourselves. When we do that, we are in an act of integrity toward the world. And I think we need to give ourselves more credit. And I don't operate in a way that we're in an emergency. I don't like to be, I know I've worked in an emergency department. I don't like to live in that way, but this is urgent. This is urgent. And we must return to the power of life, partner and align with it, and serve the world. And we can do that one day at a time, but never alone. We have to make the choice alone. But I would really invite people, if you have a sense of what I'm saying, then find a community and mentorship that has practices that keep you close to the source of your life, and just keep going there. You cannot feed this relationship with the power of life and stay small. You can't. It will allow, and by small, I don't mean everyone shows up in a different way. By small, I mean operating out of your dysfunction and limitations. If you continue to orient around life, it will guide you in a way that doesn't like make you perfect or not human, but does shine brighter than my dysfunction for sure. And if I'm not taking care of it, then it's just like my wood stove. I can't really feel the heat of that fire if I'm not feeding it. And we must.
Really, really beautiful. Yeah, we must. I'm trying by my side. I'm really, really trying and facing my strugglings, but also celebrating like the beautiful moments I've been living. And then maybe one day I will share my story in this thing.
Yeah, you might. Somebody else will ask you to share it. So I really am grateful that you have asked me to share it. And if people are interested in what our collective work here is at Springhouse, it's pretty easy. Just go to springhouse.org. And you can find the print shop there too that has our book. We have several books that we've handmade, and there's limited copies. And we have visitors a lot. So if you want to come, we're here in the Blue Ridge Mountains.
I think many people will reach you. Let's see how it goes when it goes on air, if you have some people contacting you. So thank you so much for this, Jenny.
You're welcome.
Would you like to give some final words, a final advice, something that is on your heart now?
I'm going to give you a final word from one of my favorite poets. Perfect. Let me see if I can find it. His name's William Stafford. A Ritual to Read to Each Other, from William Stafford. If you don't know the kind of person I am, and I don't know the kind of person you are, a pattern that others made may prevail in the world. In following the wrong God home, we may miss our star. For there is many a small betrayal in the mind, a shrug that lets the fragile sequence break, sending the shouts, the horrible errors of childhood, storming out to play through the broken dike. And as elephants parade holding each elephant's tail, but if one wanders, the circus won't find the park. I call it cruel, and maybe the root of all cruelty, to know what occurs, but not recognize the fact. And so I appeal to a voice, to something shadowy, a remote, important region in all who talk. Though we could fool each other, we should consider, lest the parade of our mutual life get lost in the dark. For it is important that awake people be awake, or a breaking line may discourage them back to sleep. The signals we give, yes or no or maybe, should be clear. The darkness around us is deep.
When we are publishing this episode, I'm back in Brazil. I stayed 2 weeks living Springhouse community life. Even being there, I couldn't believe how it was possible. I felt I was in a dream. In each moment, I felt included and really part of a community in which everyone had just met me. I felt truly welcomed, and that my presence was a gift to all of them, and feeling the same way around. I was curious about everyone's stories, staff, teachers, and students. I could join some classes and activities in and out of the school. The community happens in all the region, so whoever decides to embrace life can be guided if needed. It's a truly beautiful initiative that I'm flattered to have resonate the energy to be there, and I'm sure our paths will continue connected in this beautiful calling to possibilitate that all life thrives.